We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 49a. And the previous Amud, the Mishnah made a distinction between a case where a shore gores a woman and causes a miscarriage. In that case, you do not pay for the Demei Valdus, the value of the offspring. On the other hand, if a person ends up causing a miscarriage by hitting the woman, so then there is a payment of the Demei Valdus, of the value of the offspring. And the Tana Kama said that the way to evaluate what that cost is we evaluate what is the woman worth when she's pregnant, what is she worth now after she has miscarried. There's a lowering, there's a depreciation of her value, and that is the amount that is paid for the Demei Valdus. And Rav Shimon ben Gamliel responds that that is not a proper way to do the evaluation, as Rav Shimon ben Gamliel now continues, because imkain, if so, if you're going to do the evaluation in that fashion, misha isha yoledes mishabachas, when a woman actually gives birth, she actually increases in value. She doesn't go down in value, so that valuation is not going to be proper. In other words, according to the Tana Kama, the implication of the Tana Kama is that when she's pregnant, she's worth more, and therefore the causing of the miscarriage causes her to go down in value, and that's the amount that is paid. But Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is arguing that she actually goes up in value, and therefore that doesn't make sense. Rashi over here notes, Imkain misha isha yoledes mefarash beGemara. The Gemara will explain. We'll see in the Gemara various approaches to understanding what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is saying, but in any case, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Ela shaman es havaldas kama hen yafin v'nosin labal. Rather, what you do is you evaluate what is the worth of the actual offspring, and then you give that to the husband. Rashi here notes, v'nosin labal sha'torah zach solo. The point over here is that the Demei Valdus, unlike the payment of damages, let's say, to the woman, which goes to the woman herself, we'll discuss that more, but when it comes to the value of the offspring, that actually goes to the husband. The Torah says that he gets that, Tichsib Baal Ha'isha, that's learned from the Pasuk, because it says in the Pasuk, when it talks about this case, it says Baal Ha'isha, the husband of the woman, and the full Pasuk that Rashi is referring to, we can see at the side of the Gemara, V'chiyinotzu anashim v'nagfu ishahara, men are fighting and they push into a pregnant woman, V'yatzu yolada, again they cause a miscarriage, V'lo ye'asan, the case over here is that the woman doesn't die because she was struck, Ano she'yonish kasher yashis olav Baal Ha'isha, v'nasan beflilim, you see it uses the term Baal Ha'isha, we see that it is the husband that collects the value of the vlados, the value of the offspring. And the Mishnah continues, Vim ein la baal. Now let's say she doesn't have a husband, so no sin li yarshav, so then the payment goes to those who inherit him. It goes to the yarshim of the husband. And finally, the Mishnah concludes, Haisa shifcha v'nishtachara, if she was a maidservant and she was freed, o gioris, or she was a convert, pater, in that case, he's going to be pater for paying for the value of the offspring. And Rashi explains that, Haisa shifcha v'nishtachara, kilomer, what it means to say is as follows, Haisa mishuchreres o gioris nesua leger. Really the point over here is that the husband is a ger. So she was a freed slave, or she was a gioris, she was a convert, and she married a ger, ola evid mishuchar, or she married a freed slave. And the point is, ve'ein la baal shemes, she has no husband because the husband already died, so now pater, so now the person who caused the miscarriage is pater because there is no husband to pay. And the point is, since he is a convert, he has no yarshim, or since he's an evid mishuchar, he has no yarshim. The hamachzik benichse hager shemes, because if somebody takes possession of the property of a convert and the convert dies, ve'ein lo yarshim, and he has no one to inherit him, zacha, so that person is able to be zocha, he becomes the owner of that property. V'zek kodem lezakos b'mesha biyad, when this person who caused the miscarriage, so he already has what's in his possession, he essentially has been zocha, and that's why he does not have to pay. And Rashi continues and notes, the reason why the Mishnah uses the language of she was a shifcha and she was freed, why not simply say she was a mishuchreres, she was a freed slave, because we have to be talking about a case where she did not have any children from this husband. Ka'amar, that has to be the case, otherwise there would be yarshim, otherwise he would have people who would inherit him. That's why it says she was a shifcha who was freed, that it implies that this all happened very recently. The point is that they still had not had any children. And the truth is, the Mishnah could have also talked about a regular Jewish woman, who's married to a man who's a convert. The main point over here is that it's the man who has no heirs. And then the ger dies, the pater. In that case also, there's going to be an exemption from paying from the value of the vlad, the hadmei valdus labal, because again, it is the value of the vlad goes to the husband, and if there is no husband and there's no heirs to the husband, there's no one to pay. The only reason the Mishnah is talking about a shifcha and a giores, Mishum destam shivcha meshachreres nesua lemeshachrer ustam gioris lager, because in general, usually a shivcha meshachreres marries a meshachrer, marries a slave that is freed. Usually a gioris marries a ger, and those are the standard cases. But the point over here is really again that it's the husband that has no heirs. The wife in this particular case is not relevant in terms of the exemption of paying for the value of the vlad. And the Gemara says, Taima de miskavin l'chaveru, the reason why in the first case of the Mishnah where the shore causes the miscarriage that there's no paying for the demei vlados, seems to be that it's because the shore was intending to hit the other shore. That's what the Mishnah said. Ha-miskavin l'isha, but it sounds like the Mishnah is saying that if the shore would have intention to have gored the woman directly and cause the miscarriage, mishalim demei valdos, it sounds like you would pay for the value of the offspring. Leima tiyavet yuvda de Ravada Barava, let us suggest that this is a refutation of Ravada Barava. Tiyama Ravada Barava, because Ravada Barava says Shavarim sheniskavnu leisha, that even in a case where the oxen intend to hit the woman and they cause the miscarriage, Peturim midmei vlad, still there's an exemption of paying for the value of the vlad. And the Gemara says, Amar lach Ravada Barava will say to you, Hu adin da'afilu niskavnu leisha nami Peturim. The truth is that even if the shore had intention to gore the woman, also there would be Peturim midmei valdas. Also there would be an exemption of paying from the value of the offspring. V'hadakatani shor shayim miskavin l'chaver. The only reason the Mishnah talks about a case where the ox was intending to hit another ox, Aidi to kaboy lemisna seifa, that's because at the end of the Mishnah, we're going to specifically talk about intention. It's going to say at the end of the Mishnah, Adam shahayim miskavin l'chavero, a person is trying to hit his friend and then he accidentally hits the woman and causes a miscarriage. Dehachi ksiv kra, because again, that's what's written in the pasuk. The pasuk we read before, the pasuk happens to be talking about a case of v'chiyinotzu anoshim, and then they push an ishahara, they push a woman who is pregnant. So since that's what's taught at the end of the Mishnah, Katani Reisha Nami, therefore in the beginning of the Mishnah as well, it says, Shor Shayim Miskavin L'Chaver, that the shore was intending to hit another shore, but really the case would be exactly the same, the ruling would be exactly the same if the shore had intention for the woman. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rapapa says, Shor shenagach es hashifcha, if a shore gores a shifcha maidservant, v'yatzu yuladan causes a miscarriage, in that case, mishalim demei valda. So there you actually do pay for the value of the offspring, even though normally when a shore causes a miscarriage, there is no payment for demei valdas. That does not apply by a shifcha. My time, what's the reason? Chamarta mavarta bialmu, that's considered like a pregnant donkey, hu da'azik. That's what was damaged over here, meaning to say she's essentially the property of her owner. It's like regular nizik and regular damage, and you have to pay for the demei valdas as well. Diyamar Kraz, the pasuk says, Shvu lachem poim hachamor, it says, stay here with the donkey, and we understand that to mean am hadomen lechamor, a nation that is similar to a donkey. Essentially, it means to say that the shifcha is considered to be like a chamor, is considered to be like property, and that's why in that case you actually do pay for the demei valdas, even though you would not do that in a standard situation. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Ketzad Meshalim Demei Valdas, how do you determine the value of the offspring? And the Mishnah went on to say that we determine the value of the woman when she's pregnant and the value of the woman when she's no longer pregnant, and that's how we determine the Demei Valdas. And the Gemara asks, Demei Valdas Ushevach Valdas Mi Boile. It shouldn't just be Demei Valdas, it should also be the Shevach Valdas, which is the improvement in terms of the woman's value herself, because of the fact that she's pregnant. That also should be taken into account. And Rashi explains, Demei Valdas Shavach Valdasu, Dekatani Shaman Esa Isha V'chulu, because again it says you evaluate again what the woman is worth. V'yesh Bechlal Shumazu Demei Valdas, and so if you're going to do this kind of evaluation, you have the value of the Vlad, Umasha Isha Niris Mishubachas, and also the fact that the woman, she looks to be healthier when she's a little bigger. Uvalat Sevarim, she looks more robust, Memneho Uber, because of the fact that she's pregnant. V'damei Yikarn, and her value goes up. In other words, that also should be included. There should be a Shavach Valdas as well. That's what the Gemara means to say when it says Shavach Valdas mi boile. And the Gemara answers Hachinami Kamar. This really is what the Mishnah means to say. The Mishnah means to say Ketzad Meshalim Dmei Valdas Vishavach Valdas. How do you pay the worth of the Vlad and also the improvement of the Vlad? Shaman Esa Isha Kama Hiyafa. We evaluate the woman how much she is worth at Shalo Yilada, before she gave birth. V'Kama Hiyafa Misha Yilada, and how much is she worth after she gave birth? Meaning how much is she worth when she's not pregnant, and that actually includes all of those payments. And Rashi explains, Hachanami kamar ketzim mishalim dmei valdos vishavach valdos shein mashbichin as isha, because again there's an improvement to the value of the woman herself as well. Shaman as isha kama isha yafa b'shvil valdos halalu ad shelo yolda v'kama hi yafa achshav kishenis rokna. How much was she worth before when she was pregnant, before she gave birth, and how much is she worth now when she's no longer pregnant? V'nifchesu dameh, that's a depreciation of her value. V'nosin labal, and that's given to the husband. And Rashi points out, v'nizka shalisha. Now, when it comes to the damage, what we would call the nezek, that's to the woman herself, eino bechlal shumazu, that's actually not part of this evaluation. De'ein kana lepchas reikon huber. All we're evaluating is what is she, how much is she depreciated because she's no longer pregnant. Aval kichesh gufa machmas hamaka, but let's say her own body is weakened because of the fact that she was struck. V'nivchesu dameh, and now she's worth less. Mishaisa ru'uya l'milcha, from what she would have been sold, so to speak, as a slave before. Keshaisa bria reikonis, when she was healthy before. Who nezek? That's called nezek. V'eno shel baal. That doesn't go to the baal. That doesn't go to the husband. Meaning to say, it's only the demei valdus that really goes to the husband. But anything that we would call nezek actually does not go to the husband entirely. Ela keshar chavolu. It's like any other wound. Va'adin katsu b'ksuvas. That's all explained in ksubas. Who gets that money? And what it says in Ksubas is, it says, Bisman Shebeseiser, if it's something that happens in a concealed part of her body, Lo Shnei Chalakim V'lo Echad. So she actually gets 2/3 and he gets 1/3 of the Nezek payment. Uvizman Shebegoli, if it's in an area of her body that is not concealed, it's out in the open, then it's the reverse, Lo Beis Chalakim V'chulu, then he's the one that gets 2 portions, he gets 2/3 and she gets 1/3. And so again, the point of Rashi is, we are not talking here about Nezek, we're talking specifically about the value of the improvement because of the Vlad. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Amar Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel said, Imkain, if so, Misha, Isha Yoledis Mishabachas, a woman actually is worth more after she gives birth, and that's why Rav Shimon ben Gamliel disagreed with the way the Tana Kama did the evaluation. And the Gemara says, "My kamar." What exactly is Rav Shimon ben Gamliel saying? And Rashi says, "My kamar demashma dehachi kamar," because it sounds like dehachi kamarle. It sounds like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is saying to the Tana Kama, "Dimkein lididach islach demishaisha yoledes mishabachas, but Tana Kama hakamar demefachsa." It sounds like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is saying that she goes up in value after she gives birth, and it sounds like the Tana Kama is saying there's a depreciation in value. So what exactly is going on over here? And the Gemara says, Amar Rabba says, Hachi Kamar. This is what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel means to say. Does a woman really go up in value? Is she really worth more rather before she gives birth, after she gives birth? It's not true according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. In Rav Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion, a woman actually goes up in value after she gives birth more than before she gives birth. Rather, says Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, Shaman es avlados, we evaluate the worth of the actual vlad, of the actual offspring, v'nos and labal, and that's what you give to the husband, because if you're going to evaluate the worth of the woman, it's actually going to end up being backwards. According to Shimon Gamliel, unlike the Tana Kama, she's actually worth more after she gives birth. We'll see Rashi in a moment, but the Gemara goes on to say, Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that says this as well, that supports Rabba's approach. Is a woman worth more before she gives birth than after she gives birth? Really, a woman is worth more after she gives birth than before she gives birth. Rather, you just take the value of the vlad, v'nos and labal, and that's what you give to the husband. And Rashi explains, Valo isha mishabachas, again, doesn't a woman improve? B'damim la'achar sheteled. According to Shimon Gamliel, she goes up in value after the birth. Why? Because before she gives birth, she's actually worth less. Shemisukenes hi lamas. Because according to Shimon Gamliel, she actually is in danger of dying. But Tsar Leda, when she actually gives birth, we don't know if she's going to survive the birth, and therefore, in his view, she's actually worth less. And that's what the Mishnah is saying. If you're going to do the evaluation as you, Tana Kama, say, you're actually not going to end up paying anything. Because after the birth is over, she actually goes up in value. That's the view of Rabbah. And again, there's a brisa that supports Rabbah's view. And the Gemara continues with a different opinion. Rava Amar Rava says, the way to understand Rav Shimon Gamliel is as follows. Hachi Katani. This is what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel means to say. V'chi isha lemi sheyoledes mishabachas v'yein la'atzma b'shvach v'lodos klum. When a woman improves, is that improvement going to the husband, to the person who caused her to give birth, and she should get nothing in terms of that improvement? Ella, rather, says Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, shaman es havlados. What you do is you evaluate the vlad v'nosen lebal. That part goes to the husband. U'shvach v'lodos. But when it comes to her personal improvement, because of the fact that she's pregnant, as we mentioned earlier, the concept of shvach v'lodos is that the woman, when she's pregnant, she also just looks healthier because she's bigger, she's more robust. So that, according to Shimon Gamliel, that's a payment that should also go to her. That's not really the payment of the vlad. That is a different kind of payment. It's more in the category of nezek, of damage to her. And so chok, and so therefore they divide it exactly as we said in Ksubis, with the 2/3 and the 1/3. In other words, the point according to Rava within Rav Shimon Gamliel is that Rav Shimon Gamliel is saying that shvach v'lodos, that actually is a payment that should go at least somewhat to the woman herself. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that supports this as well. Amr Rav Shimon Gamliel says, V'chi isha l'misha yoledes mishabachas v'yein li'atzma b'shvach v'lodos klum. When it comes to a woman, is all the improvement when she becomes pregnant, that goes to the person who caused her to be pregnant, it goes to the husband, it doesn't go to her at all. That can't be. Elashamin nezek b'fnei atzmo v'tzar b'fnei atzmo. Rather, we evaluate the damage on its own, the pain on its own, v'shamin es havlados v'nosen lebal, and then we evaluate the vlad, and we give that to the husband, v'shevach v'lados, but the improvement that happens because she's pregnant, chok, and that actually we divide. And the Gemara now notes, Kasha Rav Shimon Gamliel, Rav Shimon Gamliel. We now have a contradiction within Rav Shimon Gamliel because you have two brises. One brisa says exactly like Rabba's explanation of Rav Shimon Gamliel, and now the second brisa says exactly like Rava's explanation of Rav Shimon Gamliel. How do we understand that? And the Gemara says, Lo Kasha, it's not difficult. Kan b'mevakeres, kan b'she'enim mevakeres. Actually, both explanations are correct. In one case, we're talking about where it's her first child. In the other case, we're talking about where it's not her first child. Meaning to say, when it is her first child, that's actually when she is worth less, according to Shimon Gamliel, when she's pregnant, because we don't know if she's going to survive that birth. And therefore, her value is actually less before she gives birth than after she gives birth. That was the first brisa. That was Rabba's understanding of Rav Shimon Gamliel, and that's a true understanding of Rav Shimon Gamliel's argument in terms of her first child. But then there's another understanding of Rav Shimon Gamliel's argument. That's when she has subsequent children. In that case, actually, she is worth more when she's pregnant than when she's not pregnant. But there, Rav Shimon Gamliel makes another argument and says still some of that improvement, it shouldn't all go to the husband, some of it should go to her. And Rashi over here explains, V'chilamisha isha yoledes, is it to the husband that we should give this improvement? Again, Lamisha zachsa Torah dmei voldos yavina nami shevach, to the person who gets the value of the offspring, we also give him the improvement because of the offspring. Dmei nafcha, meaning again, that's the value that she's more robust. Shedmei gufa misal, that her very body is worth more. Havadei shevach dmei nafcha machmas gufa nami osi v'nezeku, that's actually somewhat because of her own body, and therefore it should be in the category of nezek, of damages, where she does get some of that payment. And again, in Cholkin, so they divide it. Now Rashi understands that the Dmei Hanafach, the fact that she is worth more because she's more robust, it's not simply the division in Ksubis, but it is because of both of them. It's because a little bit of the pregnancy, but it's also because of her, and that's why she's entitled to some of that payment. That's why they divide that payment. And the Gemara continues, V'Rabbanan. Now, what about the Rabbanan's opinion? The Amri Shevach V'Lados Nami Laval. They say that the improvement to her body because of the Vlad actually does go to the husband, and she doesn't get that payment. My time, and what is their reason? Why do the Rabbanan disagree with Rav Shimon Gamliel? And the Gemara continues, Kiditanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, the Mesoras Hashas changes it to Kiditanya, as we learned in the following Brisa. This explains the opinion of the Rabbanan. Mimashma shenemar v'yatzu yiladeh. From the fact that the pasuk says that she miscarried, Eini odeya shihara, don't I know that she's a pregnant woman? Obviously, she was pregnant if she miscarried. Ma'atam lomar hara. Why does the pasuk need to say the word hara, that she is pregnant? Lomar lach, that's to tell you shavach heroyon labal, that even the improvement that happens to her because of the pregnancy, that goes to the husband. So essentially, the Rabbanan are learning this directly from the pasuk. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, Hai hara my darish bein Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. What does he do with the word hara if he's not using it for this purpose? And the Gemara says, Mi boile lechidetanya. He needs it for the following teaching in the Brisa. The Brisa says, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer. The Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, Liolam eino chayev. The person is not chayev for causing the miscarriage. Ad sheyakeno keneged beis hahiroyon, unless he strikes her at the area of her body where she is pregnant. Amar Papa says, Lo tema keneged beis hahiroyon. mamish. It doesn't have to be exactly directly at the area where she's pregnant. It just means anywhere where he strikes her, where the heat of that strike is going to hit the child, is going to hit the offspring. La fuka yad v'regel delo. The point is to exclude, let's say he hits her in her hand or in her foot. That's not at all the area of the pregnancy, so there he would not be responsible for the miscarriage. But if it's any area of the torso of the woman, so then we're going to say that he is going to be responsible in terms of the value of the vlad. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Haisa shifcha v'nishtachrero gioris potter. If she was a shifcha who was freed, or she's a convert, then he's potter from paying for the demei valdus. And as we explained, we're really talking about a situation where the husband has died and he has no heirs. He's the one that is a convert. He's the one that's a freed slave, so he has no heirs. So therefore, the person, the assailant, is going to be potter in terms of paying the value of the vlad. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabba says, Lo shanu ela shechaval ba b'chai hager. This teaching of the Mishnah is only true if the injury happened during the lifetime of the ger of the husband, umeis hager, and then the ger died. To kaven dechaval ba b'chai hager, because since he wounded her and he caused the miscarriage while the ger was alive, so zachabu hager. So really, it's the ger who merits. He's the one that should be collecting the money, meaning the demei valdus. The kaven demeis hager, and since the ger died, zachabu min hager. So then the assailant is zocha from the ger, the person who caused the miscarriage. He essentially gets to keep the money. However, says Rabba, let's say he would injure her after the ger died. So now at this point in time, she's no longer married, she's a single person. So then so then she actually is the one that owns the vlad, so to speak, and the demei valdus actually has to be paid to her in that case. And the Gemara continues, Amar of Chisda says, Mari Dichi. Mari Dichi literally means the master of this ruling, meaning he's speaking to Rab, and he says, Atu Valdos Tzrari Ninu, is the child that she's carrying, is that like a bundle of money? Bezachyabu, and she's able to be Zochin the child, and suddenly she gets it if her husband dies before she's injured? Ella, rather, we don't say that. Isei Labal Zochale Rachmana, if there is a husband, then he gets the payment of the Dmei Valdus. Let's say Labal, but let's say there is no husband. Let's say the husband dies, and then again, subsequently, after the husband dies, she is injured and she miscarries, and there's no husband at that time. So then no, there is no payment. She is not going to get that payment according to Rav Chisda. And the Gemara continues, Meitzvah, we have a question from the following. Hiko esa isha v'yatzu yiladet says, let's say again, a person strikes a woman and causes her to miscarry. No sin nezek v'tzar leisha, so he has to pay the payment of nezek and tsar, damages and pain, that goes to the woman. Udmei valdus labal, and as we said, the value of the vlad, that goes to the husband. Ein habal no sin liyarshav, if there is no husband, then you have to give that payment to his heirs. Ein ha'isha, and if the woman is no longer around, no sin liyarsha, then the payment that's supposed to go to her goes to her heirs. If she's a shivcha who is freed, or she's a giores, so then zacha, so then the assailant, he gets to keep the money, he does not have to pay. And again, the idea is, in this situation, he has no heirs, the husband has no heirs, so therefore he's able to keep the money, he doesn't have to pay the demei valdus. And the Gemara here is assuming that we're talking about both situations. We're talking about a situation, whether this happened while the ger was alive, or whether this happened while the ger was not alive. It doesn't make any difference, and that seems to go against what Rabba said, because Rabba said that if this all happens, if the injury happens after the ger dies, then he does have to pay her. But the Gemara says, Amri, the answer to this question is follows. Umi adifa mimas nisan, is this proof that you're bringing from this Bryce, is that any different than the Mishnah? Our Mishnah said the exact same thing. And what do we say the Mishnah is talking about? It's talking about when the injury happened while the ger was alive, and then the ger died. That's when we say that the assailant doesn't have to pay. That's when we say pater, and that might be what we're saying in this Bryce as well. Hachanami here also, the Bryce just means if the injury happened while the ger was alive, and then the ger died, so then zacha, then he doesn't have to pay anything. But maybe if it all happened after the ger died, maybe he would have to pay her. And so therefore, the Gemara says that this Bryce is not a question on Rabbah at all. And the Gemara continues, if you want, I could say another answer for this Bryce. La'achar misas hager, what we're talking about here really is even after. The injury happens after the death of the ger. And so again, the question is, according to Rabbah, in that case, she should get the money. And the Gemara will go on to say that maybe what it means is not zacha, but zachsa. It actually means that she does get the money, exactly like Rabbah said. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Memtes Amud Beis.